was great. All right, would we like to go ahead and get started?
Yes.
Thank you again for everyone being here on time. I'm Whitney Moore, the Executive Director of the West Seattle Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the original land of the Duwamish people. So we honor the Duwamish, past and present, for their stewardship of this land throughout the generations. Next, I'd like to acknowledge all of our platinum members for the West Seattle Chamber of Commerce. We have Amity Painting Company, Dan Wiseman, The Kenny, Kiewit, and White Center Glass. For our gold members, we have Cornerstone Benefits Consulting Group, Duwamish Tribal Services, Edward Jones, John Gerhardt, Home Street Bank here in West Seattle, Nucor Steel Seattle, Port of Seattle, Quail Park Memory Care Residencies of West Seattle, South Seattle College, Staples Westwood Village, and Verity Credit Union.
Yay!
Is that Pete just like waiting for his to be called? Thanks everyone for joining us for addressing the labor shortage. We have 3 speakers today. Anton, President and CEO of the Washington Hospitality Association. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us. Secondly, we have RDavis, Executive Director of the Seattle Jobs Initiative, and John Glynn, Director of Business Relations and Workforce Solutions, representing both WorkSource Seattle King County and Seattle King County Workforce Development Council. Let's try to get some longer organizational names in there, not quite hard enough to say those yet. So if we'd like to, we can go ahead and get started. We're going to rotate through each speaker, starting with Anthony, then we'll open it up for question and answer sessions. Any questions before we get started? No. All right, Anthony, would you like to take it away?
You bet. And thanks so much for having me on. So I respect everyone's time. About how long would you like me to open with? So I make sure that I'm not getting the hook partway through.
8 to 10 minutes or a 3-hour song and dance. It's really, really up for you.
No one wants to see the fat guy dance. So I'm going to stick to the 10-minute one and we'll be good. Am I allowed to share my screen here? Yes, I am. I'm going to kind of give you an update of a PowerPoint I gave to folks before, but the reality is we are in a brand new world with a workforce shortage for hospitality. When I gave this update before, we were back in the summer, we were short 90,000 workers. As of August, we are still short about 50,000 workers in hospitality. I think we're waiting with bated breath to see what happens in September. All of the extended unemployment insurance and $300 and other things ended on September 4th. And so we will see what happens in September, because if that's going to bite into this number, we will see what happened in September. So I was actually hoping by today they would have released the numbers, but the numbers still aren't released. So we'll know shortly. Back in the summer, I talked about the state as a whole was roughly short 180,000 workers. That number as of August is down to 103,000 that were short statewide. So hospitality is about roughly half the worker shortage is directly hitting our industry. If the economy were running at full strength, we would expect maybe another 100,000 jobs to go back. So we truly are in a worker shortage. So where are all the workers? Again, back in May, there were 34,000 workers that were still on UI or receiving PEUC. As of August, that number is down to 2,700. So of those remaining 48,000 workers that came from our industry, there's only about 2,700 going into September that were still remaining within the UI system. There were about 80,000 people going to be released through the UI. So there's other things going on that might have happened, or other workers that were in our industry that went elsewhere. But from hospitality specific, there wasn't a lot remaining within the UI system. Again, I did talk about in the next week or so, we'll know how many people are left. So where are all these workers? Where are they at? Well, for our industry, A good chunk of them went to grocery. Grocery is actually up 7,000 workers. I've been teasing my friends in the grocery business. It's probably the best time since 1954 to own a grocery store, because everyone has gone back to grocery and left other things. But we also know from the rush we've seen in restaurants and otherwise this summer that the food dollar will normalize. And so while the grocery industry is up about 7,000 workers, we'd expect that to normalize and over time to see that migrate back to hospitality, but that will not happen overnight. That will be something that will occur as workforces turn over and change. We did lose several workers in hospitality to other industries who were worried that their restaurant or their hotel may not be open because of the uncertainty in the last 18 months on COVID. And they weren't sure, they were taking the job they knew they would have versus the job that may not be there because of the difficult times we were facing. We saw that to other industries. In the restaurant side and on the assistant manager side, specifically among regional managers and cooks, we did lose a number, but I'm not sure how many to other states. So a lot of regional chains moved their regional manager to the other states that were open since they didn't need to be managing here in Washington or Oregon. And now that they've gone to refill those, they're secure in those other states, and they are seeking to try to rehire those here. And on the cook side, if you ever met a true cook, cooking to them is like their art. Asking them not to cook is like asking them to cut off their left arm. And so they went to where they could cook. And so we saw a lot of those mid-sized cooks, but again, I don't have an exact number, leave for the states that were open during COVID. And now that kind of exasperated a cooking shortage. We also lost a lot of people in our industry to what I call the lost sophomore class of 2020. We are a ton of people's first job, their first experience, learning a work ethic, learning how to show up, count money, customer service. That's a big part of our role in our community, is that first job. Well, in 2020, we were nobody's first job because we weren't open. So a lot of those people got their first job in other industries. And that means that they're normally, when you get your first job, you stay with that for 1 to 3 years. Well, that sophomore class is gone because they didn't get their first job in 2020. So that also compounds our worker shortage. We continue to see for a lot of people in our industry, the lunch hour is like the perfect job for a working parent, because the lunch hour is after kids go to school and ends before kids come back from school. But if there's no school to go to, or because your school is opening or closing and you can't rely on it, or your local childcare is shut down, you don't really have that option to come back to work until your kids are solidified. So this continues to be an issue, not just for us, but for all industries. But that is a part of where the workers are at. This other one I think is really interesting. Maybe this is because I'm a data nerd. But before COVID, we were seeing more and more people stretch out their retirement. I don't want to retire yet. I'm having a lot of fun. I like to do this. Can I maybe just work one less day? I still want to stay in the industry. And we were seeing those retirement ages stretch for about 5 to 6 years in a row. Now we're seeing during COVID, they're like, nope, it's probably time for me to retire and I'm done. So we're getting about 6 or 7 years worth of retirement in one shot. Ultimately, those were workers we had that we don't have now. You combine that with the fact that Gen X, which I am and Dan is and a couple other people on the call are, we're a lot smaller generation than the boomers. And so for every boomer that retires, there's not enough to replace them with Gen Xers. So that has been coming for a while, and that continues to be a stressor on the workforce. And so those are some of the areas that we are just flat out short on workers. When I look at the most recent ESD numbers for August, there were about there were 70,000 people claiming continued unemployment. The number back in August of 2019 was 40,000. And that was a red hot economy. And there will always be some natural unemployment. So that's kind of the number of workers that may be coming off here and moving forward from there. I think the other thing that's really interesting is the total number of people employed in Washington is starting to get closer and closer to the number we saw in 2019 and may exceed it after the September numbers. So if that comes out to be true, we have the workforce we have. And the industry, for that being short of 50,000 workers, depending on what the September numbers come out to be, is going to have to rethink and redo and be creative in how it competes for workers moving forward. With that, I'll pause because there's a lot of ways to do that, and then we'll probably get into the solution mode later.
Great. Next up, we have RDavis, Executive Director from the Seattle Jobs Initiative.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here today. If you have not heard of SJI, we are a nonprofit organization that focuses on workforce development. And in particular, we are focused on serving underinvested communities to help folks get into careers. A lot of the things that Anthony just mentioned were things that I was going to say, and I would echo all of those. The challenges that are being faced right now. The numbers are being updated weekly. So while it was 100,000 short a couple of weeks ago, we're starting to whittle away at that, but we're probably not going to get back in terms of our total labor force to where we were before. A couple things I did want to highlight that maybe have not, Anthony mentioned childcare. That continues to be a huge barrier for folks. It's not just the cost of childcare, but it's the availability of childcare workers. So there's kind of a dual edge of the problem. We have to be able to skill up additional childcare workers, and that's part of the Build Back Better plan from the Biden administration, not only to provide a childcare benefit, but also to create additional pathways to subsidize the cost of that education. Those jobs don't pay great, and they require that upfront investment to be able to be certified and licensed and get those skills. So we need to be looking at innovative ways to build up that childcare workforce to support all the other industries. I think one other thing that has been overlooked as well is actually the medical impact of COVID on the workforce. Not just, we're aware, CNN reminds us every day of the number of people that have tragically passed away due to COVID, but long COVID is a real thing. And we don't have good data yet on how many people are facing long-term disabilities due to the lingering effects of COVID. So individuals that maybe were hospitalized and were able to persevere, but those long-term disability claims, I think, will probably be about another year out before we get a quantification. So that's another pressure point on the workforce, particularly for individuals that are looking to hire for people to do, on your feet jobs or physically demanding jobs, such as in food service as an example, or warehouse work. So I think that's just another additional challenge that we're seeing out there. Are we talking about some solutions just yet, or are we going to wait for that a little bit later in the conversation?
If you have solutions, you can totally use the time to tell us.
Good deal. So a couple things that when we're talking to employers about is ways to be able to try to optimize during this time. So number one, with our employer partners, we know that during COVID, our processes all got thrown into disarray. So how we're going about hiring got thrown out. But focusing on reducing that hiring time cycle from the time that somebody comes to interview till the time that you are able to extend an offer to that person. If you can shrink that time down, you have a much better opportunity to be able to retain that. Individuals that we're working with will often take a job maybe from their second choice employer because it comes quicker, rather than wait for a job that may take a couple weeks to get through that process. Number two, recognize the limits of online job postings. ZipRecruiter is great. It's a one-click option. Great, check. I posted my job. It's going to go out to those places, but recognize that those algorithms put limitations on who sees your ad, who's encouraged to reply to that ad, and look to go beyond some of those online components. Not everybody that you are looking to add into your workforce is active on those platforms. So look for other ways. I know Glynn's going to be following after this, and WorkSource is an awesome tool to be able to get into folks that are working with the navigator or employment specialist in that system. But reach out to your local community organizations, your mosque and your churches in your community. Get creative about sourcing for people that may not just be in those areas. The other thing too is with your job postings, take a review of those. Do you have requirements in there that you don't really need? The more requirements that you have, the less likely somebody is, even if they marginally meet that, to apply. And this is particularly true for women and individuals of color. If they see in the job descriptions criteria or even a preferred qualification that they don't have, there's about an 8 times less likely that they're actually going to click send or submit on their resume or application. So reducing all of those different qualifications that are had. Maybe you had that current driver's license or current insurance on there back when the position maybe had a driving requirement, and now your position doesn't need it, or you don't necessarily have to have somebody that has that. So pulling those requirements back would be we've seen to be very helpful. And I would say looking at flexible work options, and we know that not every industry can have work from home. Flexible doesn't necessarily mean work from home, but flexible can be different hours. It can be predictable schedules. It can be, oh, can I give you 2 hours off to take care of your children so you don't have that child care barrier? So being able to look at some of those policies or schedules, work with your staff and team and see if you can determine some of those flexible areas, that will go a long way. Even at SJI, we're not bringing people back to the office full-time. We are embracing a very much a flexible mantra where folks need to be in person when and where they need to be in person. Else folks can work remotely, either at their home for a short time, even if they wanted to go to Hawaii, although that means definitely showing up for 9 o'clock meetings kind of early in the morning. But in those opportunities, but by giving people that flexibility, you're going to be able to retain the staff that you have and then be able to continue to bring on that new talent that's needed. So just a couple of things that we've seen with our employer partnerships that have worked to be able to bring new folks in, and then also just as important, be able to retain them as part of a skilled workforce.
Awesome. Next, we have Glynn, Director of Business Relations and Workforce Solutions for WorkSource Seattle-King County and Seattle-King County Workforce Development Council. Are you ready, John?
I am ready. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So, for the sake of time, a lot of great topics were hit. Anthony had an awesome presentation. So first I should say, what is WorkSource? Not assuming everybody knows what that is. WorkSource is not an entity. It's a consortium of partners from education, government, and community-based organizations. Everybody falls under something called the public workforce system. I am taxpayer funded from the federal government. For example, all 50 states have a public workforce system. In this particular state, it's branded as WorkSource. And so there are tools and resources available for both businesses and job seekers. It gets dominated by job seeker conversations. For example, the unemployment is one of those benefits that is available through our Employment Security Department partners, and a very important. But WorkSource centers are not unemployment offices. There are some that serve, but actually everything is done online now. So WorkSource is this consortium, for example, in King County, 7 centers and affiliates, the brick and mortar sites, also called American Job Centers. They are run by 4 different entities here. King County runs one, Employment Security Department runs 4, South Seattle College runs one, North Seattle, and the YWCA downtown. So that's just to give you a mindset of what that is. And so I represent the business side. So my job is to make sure that businesses understand what's available for them, the tools and resources, around 3 different areas. That's recruiting, reductions, and retention. Unfortunately, I spent last year with a lot of reduction called the Rapid Response Program, which is a federal program of helping businesses through those layoff transitions, of which just Boeing by itself, we did 57 layoff presentations. So, but we're also here to help small business. So we redesigned the program so that any business, no matter the size, 1 person to 1 million people, there's resources available for their staff for employee relations. So we're not here to talk about that because we have flipped the switch to recruitment now, has gone completely to that direction. And so every day, all day, my team and I, we receive inquiries from businesses, large and small, about what's available for them. Ryan mentioned one, and that is the state's job board, WorkSource Washington. It is available at no cost, but depending on the size of the business, it may not be exactly what you need, but it is there. And there's a program inside of that job seekers who are applying for unemployment benefits actually have to create a Secure Access Washington account and apply for jobs. And whenever the world shall meet, that's what that job board is for. All 50 states have a job board that is no cost. And so there's something called the Job Match program in there that you can source talent from. And I can speak for you because I redesigned our business services program team beginning in July. I posted jobs and I used that as a source to find applicants. And so is it the be all end all? No, please don't think that that's the only way you're going to find talent. It's a multitude of things, online being one. But again, I just wanted to point out that there are jobs. There is a compliance function for that too. And everything that we do for quote unquote WorkSource is centered around helping our underserved populations, because that's what we're designed around, the 14 WIOA populations: youth, low income, veterans, persons with disabilities, et cetera. And so, for that, we also required events was a big portion that we did, no cost events. For example, working with the West Seattle Chamber back in the day, we did events at the Junction, and we brought businesses together. We did on-site events. Well, that world has changed because we can't go on-site anymore right now, and everything is done virtually. So we've had to slowly change that model. But it's not just WorkSource events. All of our partners, all 10 community colleges are WorkSource connection sites. All of our community-based partners, people like SJI. So, all of them are coming together under that. And so the only thing that I will add is we've reached an apex or a point that hasn't happened for about a decade. Obviously technology was a big one, but now we've reached this apex where, online. And so kind of three big areas. It's labor has the upper hand right now, obviously with wage demands. We're seeing bonuses to hire, and Anthony might be happy, but yeah, my senior got his first job as a dishwasher this summer, and he applied the first time and he got it and he was excited. I didn't want to tell him that, well, you're probably the only applicant, but that's okay. But we have to get the youth engaged with not only hospitality, but other sectors. And so that's got to be a big focus. But, the face-to-face service sectors are struggling right now because those that aren't face-to-face are allowed to have a remote option. And there's a lot of labor demands for that option. As Ryan had mentioned too about, hey, I'll work in Hawaii. I'm sitting here working from my home that I typically never used to work from home like ever, but now it's just become like norm. And even companies like Zillow are promoting like, we don't care where you work. And so now you have this, huge, labor demand on there. But those forward-facing jobs, healthcare, restaurants, it makes it difficult. And so that is one of those labor challenges, that are there. So I'm going to pause from there and just, and talk about other solutions. But as I mentioned, online and the virtual recruiting events. And then lastly is, and I can't express it more as what Ryan said, you have to engage with community partners and those that are geographically located around you. Again, they can be community-based organizations and others that are around there that have that talent pool and provide that first opportunity.
Do you want me to walk? That was great, John. Do you want me to then walk through my solutions before you open up for questions, or how do you want to do that?
All about the solutions. Yes.
So one, you should also ask John about WorkShare. I always get a shared work or WorkShare, John. I always get the name backwards.
Yeah, shared work.
Ask John about shared work. It's a great program. And if you're not signed up for it, you really should be, whether it's to solve today's problem or one you have in the future. I'm a big fan of the shared work program. All right, let's do this there and then quickly go here. So a couple of the solutions I would offer. One, reinvent. The reality is our business is changing. How do you do tech? How can you do lean hospitality? How do you look at maybe doing service differently? Things you probably wouldn't consider. We're going to be in this labor shortage for probably until the generations start shifting again. So call it 3 to 4 years. We're just going to be flat out. There'll be more jobs than workers. And so you're going to have to figure out how to do business differently. Also, I would revisit profitable hours. This was the suggestion back in spring, and you're already seeing many operators do it. If you're not profitable on a Monday night, why are you open? If you're not profitable for lunch on a Sunday, why are you open? And I think you're seeing a lot of people look at their P&L by shift and get away from doing it that, and then moving those workers to where you actually can stay open and make money and stay in business. And so you're seeing that across the city in many areas. Some of your favorite places are no longer open 7 days a week or for lunch and dinner. The other thing is, gone are the days where they're going to come to you and you can post. You got to turn into hunters. Recruit your team. Go to school registrations. Sponsor a high school basketball game. Search culinary blogs. If you remember the 70s and you've been around for a while, we used to have industry parties, right? So throw an industry party celebrating cooks or servers and then build relationships. But really stop being passive and thinking that throwing up a sign or a blog post is going to get you there. I think today for 3-4 years, we're gonna have to turn into recruiters. Compete. The reality is, as you heard from John and from Ryan, a lot of other businesses are out there and they're posting and they're hiring. It used to be you would worry about what the restaurant down the street paid for a cook. Now you really should be aware of what Amazon's paying and what Warehouse is paying and what other people are paying, and are you being competitive? You don't have to be higher per se, but you can't be way out of the league because we're competing in hospitality with those areas specifically. I would actively consider revisiting benefits. Our healthcare and our other insurance programs are getting more inquiries than ever because of the way we're having to compete. Benefits are great anchors. People don't really want to move their healthcare a bunch of times, where they might leave you for 15 more cents an hour. If they have to shift their healthcare or other things, that makes it a harder sticking point to move from. Another one is consider going gig. Maybe it's, and this is really radical thinking, but I think we need to be open to it, because for a lot of millennials and whatever the generation below them is now called, I keep getting the name wrong, they would rather work an Uber or another shift because of the flexibility to it. How do we think that way? How do we say, great, I'll take you on Friday nights, or I'll share you with different operations? Is there any way to do app-based scheduling? What are the other ways we can do to match what a generation wants? Because they don't want what maybe as a Gen Xer I wanted, in the certainty of a 40-hour work week. A lot of them want flexibility in different things. And I think we have to listen to what they are telling us they would like. Culture, I'm just going to keep coming back to this one. If you ask your team to recruit people and you will pay them for everyone to recruit, and they don't want to, or they're unsuccessful, I would really look at your own culture. If people love where they're at and it feels like family and they're really engaged with where they are, and they feel like you believe in them and their future, they'd be excited to recruit their friends and other people who think like them to work for you. But if like, no, I don't want to do that, that probably tells you you got some culture work to do. And so is your culture an attractive one? Will your team help you recruit to it? As always, if you increase all your wages, but you don't revisit your pricing, or you say, I can't increase wages because my pricing and otherwise I can't afford it. At the end of the day, we've got a circular motion here. You've got to be competitive on your wages and have your pricing reflected. It's got to be what's right for you. And I know from being in the industry my entire life, this is the tough one. But I really would actively encourage you to think through, what do you need to pay to be competitive? Not be the top, but be competitive. And then don't forget to make sure your pricing aligns so you can stay in business, because you can't lose money on every sale. Lastly, I think I would share, show a vision for a workforce. John, I think you invited me in and others invited me into the WorkSource groups, saying millennials aren't necessarily attracted to hospitality because they don't understand its future. And so when you recruit, talk about what that career ladder looks like. Not the counter job you'd have today, but the job that gets them to 24, 26, 30 and management. I mean, you can get to that job in 3 or 4 years in hospitality, but the younger generation doesn't see it. They see that first job and assumes that's the end job. And like, no, you really should only be there 6 months before you're moving again. But we're gonna have to be more engaged and active in selling a vision for what their potential is than we ever have been before. So those are some of my solutions, and I'll be quiet for a second. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you for your solutions. We've got a few questions, so we're going to start going through these. This one's for John. What other sectors are really actively looking for low-skill youth workers other than food service and grocery?
It's a good question. Maritime. I mean, there's, I know it's not, healthcare, and then you're like, well, they're not really nurses, but they're looking to get those people into pathways. But hospitals are like little mini cities anyway. They have people that have restaurants inside or food inside of it. They need people to help with laundry and all the other issues. So I can't say that there's one that's dominated. I mean, obviously, I guess societal wise, retail, brick and mortar retail, I should say, and hospitality restaurant has always been kind of looked as the entry point. I started working as a junior at a restaurant. So, that's where that goes. But, there's others that, like I mentioned, in this particular area where you have that maritime and others. So not to ramble on, but it's, we created an entire sector that did not exist over a decade ago, and that's Amazon. And so now you created this entire industry that is competing with brick and mortar retail along with, delivery methods and distribution on top of the needs that are already there, restaurants and others. So it's just kind of compounded the problem.
Yeah, to add on to what John said, I would say that supply chain logistics, so the warehouse jobs, I know both UPS and other providers are actively going out to community colleges, for example, for seasonal help. The US Post Office is hiring, and you can go from a temporary employee to a full-time unionized federal job in 7 months. So that's another sector. And for John to mention healthcare, absolutely healthcare, because you can come in working in food service and healthcare. You can come in working in the warehouse and in healthcare. And then once you're able to access benefits, they'll pay for you to become a certified nursing assistant. Lots of high schools are offering certified nursing assistant programs in their senior year. And then that pathway can then move up. So there's definitely other industries looking to attract their workers earlier in their career and learning cycles than before.
Great.
I would say the other opportunity for anyone looking, and maybe the most important job in hospitality right now, are truck drivers. And not working for my restaurants or hotels, but the shortage of truck drivers from our suppliers is bad. Didn't get better in September. I got a briefing from them yesterday, and their overtime options are pretty much running out. So they are looking to hire people at $65,000 a year with $1,000 bonuses, and they cannot find enough bodies. And so I would say that they're looking for pickers or trying to grow people, but the Cisco's, US Foods, Harbor Views, all the suppliers for the industry are hurting, which is hurting Dan and others who are missing drops because they get ghosted by the truck driver who didn't show up for the day, and then the product doesn't show today, and you go into your favorite restaurant and they just don't have the product. It didn't show up. And so that's it might be the most important worker we're shortage, and I didn't even talk about that earlier.
Yeah, if I could throw in, like, I can't even get pizza boxes right now. And I don't mean like I can't get them delivered. I can't go pick them up anywhere. They're now being ordered on Amazon, shockingly, for way more than I should pay, but they are not made they're not normally made in the States anymore. And so they're sitting in cargo containers offshore waiting to get unloaded. And the port's backed up. If Lindsay was here, they don't have enough workers there. They don't have enough rail yard folks. They don't have enough truckers. The supply chain is a massive issue that's only getting worse. That's really impacting the health of the small business community. I did want to throw out to Anthony or any of the other gentlemen here. Is there any good connections for second chance employment? Like looking for folks who have been released from jail, folks that are, have had previous issues, and also not in that same category, but folks coming in from outside the country, like refugees from Afghanistan or other countries. I'm sure those folks will be looking to work. How does someone reach out and offer jobs and connect with those folks?
Let me start with Seattle's got a great nonprofit to help second chance workers coming out of the correctional system, and to help people grow careers. And I'm gonna, while someone else gives an answer, I'll go in and dig out the link and try to put it in there. But that's their mission, is to help people who've been challenged. They've done their time. They want to come back into our community and society, and they're struggling to get through traditional doors or know where to look. And it's a really great nonprofit. And if you're looking to help people get a second chance, it's a great one to call. And I'll find the link and post it in the chat.
In terms of the for immigrant refugee communities, there oftentimes that is by different communities. So one that is, and I'll put this in the chat as well, is Partner in Employment. And they are located in, I think, Burien White Center border area. So they would definitely have folks that would be able to access, in-person work opportunities in West Seattle. We work closely with Congolese Integration Network and then Literacy Source, because lots of individuals are going to Literacy Source to be able to improve English skills. And the city has a program called Ready to Work, and funds Literacy Source and a couple other nonprofit organizations looking for that. So I will put a couple of those links in the chat as well for folks to reach out to.
Yeah, and I can add that, I mean, that's the reason for my entire existence, and that's what WorkSource is. So I realized this about 5 years ago, and that's where I've identified hundreds of community partners. So there are direct WorkSource partners, HopeLink, and others. And then there's the indirect partners, which is a lot. For example, like Weld is a big one that helps, that I connect a lot with individuals that are trying to formerly incarcerated, or justice involved is the term that's used a lot too. And so, we have, I think we were told 1,500 Afghan refugees coming to our area that need to be settled. So I connected, there's 3 different partners locally, HopeLink, International Rescue Committee, and Refugee Women's Alliance, REWA is the term. So those 3 are helping. So I realized that that was a piece of the puzzle that's always been missing. And so it's my mission, this is to create something where it can be provided to everybody, instead of having this big old 200 spreadsheet with all these contacts and organizations. But technically, when you go onto WorkSource and you look up organizations, you'll see about 35 different organizations. Seattle Housing Authority is another one. And so you have those, but we're talking into organizations that have that talent, and then you need to find them geographically around you. So for example, if it's downtown Seattle, where do we have a lot of folks that need that work and that talent? Well, we have Mary's Place, we have Seattle Gospel, we have homeless organizations that how can we partner with them and come up with a program to help those people and be able to get a job. So long story short, I'm probably about 30 days away to where I'll have a link on the WorkSource Seattle King County site where you can just download that list and go crazy. And so that's what we're trying to do more and more of, because one thing I realized, I've been on that side of the fence. I've run a P&L, and I know that, getting that information is key, because there's nothing that exists. There's all different things out there to try to find it. So as far as a solution, I'm happy to share that list with what I have. And if you want to reach out, I know I'm happy to provide that as I have it updated currently with contacts. And then in the future, I'll make sure to provide that. So my other job is to go to all the chambers of commerce and all the business districts and make sure they find this information and get this to you. Because again, it's all taxpayer funded. So
That's great to hear. I've always found it so incredibly difficult to navigate, trying to find which of the community, like who's the gatekeeper, who funnels me to who, how do I get, like, I just want to talk to the person who got released from jail and needs a job coming out.
Yeah.
That just needs a second chance. And I can, they don't have cooking skills, but I'll train them. Like I train most of my cooks myself, and it's hard to just get to that person. And so, any ways that you can help the chamber membership here be able to figure out where to go.
Fair start. I mean, that's another one. Again, I just keep rattling these off, and there's all these organizations, but there's not a central repository. I mean, WorkSource was designed for that, but those are direct partners, but you have all these indirect partners that are all helping these 14 buried populations. And that's what happened when I first came aboard too. I was like, how many youth organizations are there in King County? And somebody kind of laughed and like, I don't know. How many veteran organizations? I don't know. And I was like, oh my goodness, again, it's not the first time this idea has ever come up. Everybody's tried it, the 211s of the world stuff. The problem is gathering that information and keeping it current. And so that's why I've dedicated a person on my team. That's all they're going to do is try to keep that as current as we can to provide that solution. Because like you said, it's not just posting jobs, or I call it post and pray. You got to source talent. You got to go to events. You're going to have to get with your community. I mean, we have to go back to that community. The last thing I will say, and Anthony touched on it 100%, is technology and using that technology. I know going to a restaurant and maybe a person's not taking my order, but I'm using a keypad to punch in my order from there, and utilizing that technology, for that labor shortage. And I always use, and I'll leave you at this. I call it the Dick's drive-in model. And you got to be right around the Dick's drive-in model, which is $19 an hour. They're offering some benefits, and I welcome you to kind of go to their link. And they built that model around the Amazon model. And so you kind of got to be around that. And then, obviously taking a look at where you can. Labor is the most expensive cost. I get it. So how can you do that? So I will be quiet, and I'll put the Dick's drive-in link too.
All right, we have 3 questions in the chat. The first one, on the topic of workplace culture, hiring from populations that may be different from you is great, and retention is based a lot on providing a culture of belonging and inclusion, in addition to wages, benefits, and scheduling predictability. This is a big topic, and I'm curious whether any of the speakers' organizations lean into that with their employers.
So great question for where I'm at. We are actually starting a podcast on leadership and culture. We've partnered with my favorite author group on the topic. If you've read of any of the Table Group's books or Patrick Lencioni's books, 5 Functions of a Team, The Ideal Team Player, The Motive, there's a bunch of them, and they're really good books. And so we're going to be doing a podcast focused on how you develop your culture within hospitality. We're going to bring in a real Washington restaurateur and hotelier each week or each month, and to make sure they stay in the real world and not this hypothetical white ivory tower world, and try to start giving really good tools and tricks to develop our culture. Because honestly, for hospitality, the feeling of culture, its reputation isn't as good as the reality is. And so I think we want to do more to help promote that. And those will hopefully help the next generation and other folks start improving on their culture. So that starts next week will be our very first podcast on hospitality leadership and culture development.
Yeah, and I will add to that. So we work closely with the healthcare industry leadership table, which is healthcare employers, not just the large hospitals, but also our small community employers as well. And addressing particularly race equity in the workplace has been front and center of the work. So a lot of that's just another example of another industry that is beginning to lean into diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just because it's the morally right thing to do, but it also has a business case to be made for that as well.
Awesome. Next question, John, you mentioned WIOA. How are businesses accessing employment agencies that specialize in supporting employers with recruiting and training individuals with disabilities?
Yeah, as I've mentioned, we're not a single entity, but a consortium. So I would lean on the community partners that are part of the workforce system or WorkSource system. DVR, Division of Voc Rehab, is a big partner. And then we have, others that are part of our system that help persons with disabilities gain employment. So there's some organizations. Off the top of my head, I mentioned DVR. They're the largest that the system partners with.
Great. Next question, Anthony, you said that this labor shortage will take a full generation to get back to normal. Knowing/hoping we'll be out of the pandemic mode within the next 12 months, is there a possibility that the industry will right size sooner? Sooner than a full generation?
Well, one, I'm glad let me give it a chance to give my language clarity. Gen Xers will start moving into the retirement age. When that happens, the generation behind them is actually larger than Gen Xers. So that's going to start resizing stuff. I didn't mean wait 15 years. I meant most of the boomer generation will be in the retirement age sectors, and we'll start seeing millennial or Gen Xers start to retire. We're a small generation. And so that's, for clarity, that's what I meant when I was talking about that earlier. I think if we right size, the right sizing is going to be negative and not positive. So I'm hoping not, meaning we just have fewer restaurants and hotels and businesses. That would be what right sizing would look like, because there's just not going to be enough bodies. I also think the tech, no one got into a restaurant because they love technology. They got into a restaurant because they love beer, or they love creating food, or they love the experience, or they love being part of a community that's celebrating. They love you, right? Those are the reasons you get into hospitality, which means those people tend to not really be tech savvy. So the current older generation of leaders doesn't think, hey, how can I use a computer to make my life better? How do I use a QR code to make service easier? How do I do all these? They don't come in with that knowledge base. The next generation of leaders that are coming in grew up having this at age 10, right? And thinking, how do I use this to make my life better? And they can still like hospitality. I think there is a lot of technology that exists today that can help us bridge this worker gap. And if done right, we don't have to lose great hospitality. I still think you can have great tableside service, come in, scan your QR code, and it remembers your allergies, your favorite food, the last bottle of wine you had. Did you like that? Do you want to have it again? All the things that, and still have someone great at the table side, but maybe they cover a station of 8 versus a station of 5. And I think those are some of the things we're having to consider as we move forward. That's just an example, but there's a ton of them. There's a lot of, for lodging, night robots, and these are really cool. But when you call down to the first floor and like, I forgot toothpaste, typically if you're running a skeleton crew, one person's got to leave the front desk and take up your toothpaste and get it to you. And if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you're entering a situation, you don't know what's behind that door when you knock on it. Now we'll have the ability to basically send a drone, it's not really a flying drone, and drop off your toothpaste at the front door. And those are technologies that will save the requirements that used to be able to take bodies, because the bodies just aren't going to exist. So those are some of the things we're seeing. This will right size eventually. I've been all doom and gloom. Let me be really excited about something. I love the generations that are coming in because they value experiences. I think the future of hospitality is incredibly bright because we're replacing generations, me, boomers, that valued objects and things. And you think about when we got for Christmas when we were younger, we wanted an Atari, we wanted a baseball glove, we wanted an object. The generation and pulling support systems that are coming behind us want experiences. That's what hospitality provides, is great experiences. You know, coming into an area and seeing their authentic, real local food and taste the flavor of the area and see those community and the lodging and what it can offer to be local. The buying dollars spent on experiences is going to be higher for a few generations in a row. I'm sure there'll be times where the pendulum swings, but this is an exciting time. We just have some things to get through while we get there.
And this looks like it'll be our last question. Do a lot of the places in hospitality industry that are hiring require employees to have a COVID vaccine?
Yes. In the Seattle area, that is definitely a yes. I'm sure Anthony's experience statewide might be slightly different. But yeah, like my restaurant's been 100% vaccinated. Both have been 100% vaccinated for months, and we will not hire without a vaccine. And when people get concerned about that, the easy explanation is, I get it's your right to choose what you put in your body, but the choice has consequences. That choice can't shut down our restaurant for 5 days as everyone gets tested and cause economic impact and damage to every other employee and the business owner. So I would say that you are very likely to walk into a restaurant in the Seattle area to have 100% vaccinated staff.
100% agree with Dan. I kind of view this like smoking, just on a really compressed timeline. If you remember the early 80s, everybody smoked. McDonald's had ashtrays in Ronald McDonald's hand, right? I mean, everyone smoked. And then more and more people started making choices. And then more and more communities started being non-smoking, making it easier for people to move there. Not on a decade timeline, but in a compressed timeline, the more you see those communities cross over to the 80% vaccinated, being a vaccinated facility is going to be a competitive advantage because that's what 80% of the clients are going to want. And so not every community is there yet. If you're in Lewis or Soton or some of the remote areas and you're at 40% vaccinated, that's a tougher thing today, but it's where it's headed. And I think eventually you will see all the communities move past that 80 to 90% Rubicon, and this will become the norm. But it will be a transition, and it'll be what's right for the communities as they happen. But I 100% agree with Dan.
We have heard from friends on Capitol Hill when they really kicked this off about 2 months ago. A lot of them started going 100% vaccine required, and they got a lot of angry Yelp stuff from around the country, but had nothing to do with actual experience. Their business went up. So people came out knowing that it was 100% vaccinated. And so that's where a lot of us, those canaries in the coal mine, helped us, a lot of us make the decision to jump early into that pattern as well. But that's where it's at. So yep, everyone's moving towards that.
Yeah, that and the other one is workplace safety. You know, I would be remiss if you have not been to downtown Seattle or other areas, and workers with workplace safety going to and from work, or even having to deal with the workplace safety at the workplace, telling somebody they have to do something, wear a mask or do whatever. I hear a lot of that, especially with our downtown businesses, as far as worker safety and what can they do. That's obviously a political hot button that I will not touch.
Yeah, I would say that is the one worry I do have on the guest facing mandate. I think, again, we're getting there. Eventually, this is where we're headed. But in this transition, it so depends on the community, and it so depends on the business and their clientele and their makeup and their neighborhood. To the degree that West Seattle can keep reminding everyone to be kind, right? The 17-year-old hostess did not invent COVID, did not supply the mandate, did not do these things. And I had to intercede the other day in Olympia with someone who was just screaming at the front end person. And I'm like, you want to turn your anger to me, because that is not her fault. and that was probably stupid of me. No one would recommend that, what I did. I was trying to protect someone. But my broader point is we've got to encourage people to be kind. And there are safety situations being created. Again, it's community by community, less likely on Capitol Hill, more likely in Lewis or Soton. But we're going to get there. And I don't think we should be afraid of getting there, but workplace safety is something we're going to have to keep in mind. And Chamber and others, keep reminding the community, these are good people wanting to serve and have you a good time. Berating front-end staff is not the answer to their frustrations. Be kind.
A lot of them feel they've been deputized by the health department against their will to be the enforcers without additional pay. And that's kind of, in reality, that's what's happened. So be kind. I've seen it at both places, way more in Burien, but it's unreal that people treat front of house staff like that. And that causes labor shortages. I know people who have quit, 17, 18-year-olds who are working as a host somewhere who have been berated by a big scary guy who wanted to scream about politics. And they're like, screw this, I'm out.
Yep.
And this is causing the same thing. So, yep, society needs to be a little kinder.